Hello, this is Keith Scott here. I was the voice of Bullwinkle Moose in The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle.
I was also the narrator of that movie.
I was the narrator of George of the Jungle.
In Blinky Bill, I was the voices of Wombo the Wombat, Flap the Platypus, Splodge the Kangaroo. I was the voice of Diesel 10 just for a few minutes in Thomas. Here in Australia, I was the licensed voice for all of the Looney Tunes characters and the Hanna-Barbera characters. And I'm very happy to be associated with this excellent documentary on the great Bill Scott. In fact, one of Bill's friends just wants to say one more thing.
Hello there, Bullwinkle Moose here saying you're watching In Conversation with Amber the Fangirl, ATF. And a darn good thing you are watching too.
Hi guys, Amber here.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Welcome back to another episode.
Oh, that's a pleasure. Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of In Conversation with ATF. Today, my guest is my first international guest. All the guests I've had so far are from America. This is the first time I've ever had someone outside of America on my show. My guest is from Australia.
Yes, Little America.
He's from Australia. You may know him as the voice of Bullwinkle from The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle. That's the film. And also, obviously, Bill Scott's successor as the voice of Bullwinkle, mainly, for all the little projects and stuff like that. You may know him as the narrator from the George of the Jungle film. He's done a lot of work for Your Own Gross. He's done Blinky Bill. He's all the male characters apart from Blinky Bill himself. So, I still have the VHS on of the film down there on one of my shelves.
The feature film, yeah.
I think it aired on the BBC.
It was a cheap organization for a little while there because they had myself and Robin Moore, and she was every female and I was every male. So for a little while, it was just two people that they kept hiring for until it started sounding too similar. And then they brought in a few other actors, for the future projects. But
let's have a look. Oh, yes, you may know my guest as the original voice of Diesel 10 from Thomas and the Magic Railroad before being replaced.
Which didn't they didn't use me. Yes, they thought I was too scary for little kids to listen to. So
yeah.
I did him as an impersonation of Billy Bletcher, the little actor who used to be the big bad wolf for Walt Disney.
Oh, wow.
So,
I still have the director's
that sort of voice. And they said after they listened to it, it was like too scary. So I was replaced.
Yeah.
But I did. They flew me all the way to Toronto, Canada, from Sydney, Australia, to do that.
And you met Michael Angelis, the original UK narrator.
God rest his soul. I was sad to hear he passed this year. Yeah.
He died. Yeah. God bless his soul. Honestly. You met.
I had lunch with him and told him I'd seen him on an old episode of A Touch of Frost the week before, and he was so.
Gosh.
He was so knocked out by the fact
I know
that
what exact episode you're talking about. Me and my friends always joke about it. Oh my gosh. It's like when his house gets robbed, he's like,
he was a
those
villain.
bastards broke into my house, stole my wife's fur coats and jewelry, kidnapped my daughter, and subjected her.
But wasn't he a villain in it?
I think so. I haven't seen the full episode.
Yeah, I think he was in more than one. In one of them, I know he was a bad guy.
I've seen him in Auf Wiedersehen, Pet. I think he was Mickey Starter.
Yeah. Right.
Love him. Oh, man. So funny as well. And what else have you done? My guest has also done lots of related stuff like Tales of a Luna, Nate is Late, Sally Bollywood. You were actually in Dennis and Nasher as well. And
yes.
A lot of other things. I never knew that. Oh, and also the spin-off Fractured Fairy Tales, The Fox, The Box, and The Locks. Which
they used as the opening of the Dudley Do-Right feature, which I wasn't involved in, but
that's right.
I was really proud of that because I kind of was responsible for that little Fractured Fairy Tale being made because I had an old script that Bill Scott had given me for one that was never used.
Oh, wow.
And when I mentioned it to Tiffany Wood and they were thinking of the Rocky and Bullwinkle feature film, they were hoping to get little spin-offs like Fractured Fairy Tales. So I sent that script back to her, kept an original for myself, of course. And first thing I got when I got to the States for that big, long job I was doing, Rocky and Bullwinkle, was to go and do the soundtrack of this cartoon, this Fractured Fairy Tale with June Foray. And that was real fun because it was my one theatrical short that I'm very proud of.
Wasn't Jeff Bennett, or am I just thinking?
Yes, he was. He only had a couple of bit parts in that, like a little old man.
Yeah.
But I was the two main characters. I was the fox and the dumb guy, Dulwit.
Yeah.
Dennis Dull. I can't think of his first name.
Yeah. And June Frey was the little milk
Yeah.
woman, milk
The
lady.
milkmaid. Yeah.
Milkmaid, that's it. I couldn't think of the proper term.
Yes.
Wasn't there like an incident where like the producers thought she was too old or something like that? Because I remember reading about it on a blog post or something. I think you were there, or something about.
I was there, and
an early recording session, like 9 a.m.
And it was also that was the gig where I was living in LA for about 5 months doing the Rocky and Bullwinkle movie, and you know, she found out, but I guess it's standard practice, but they were worried that she was too old to do Rocky in the Rocky and Bullwinkle movie, and so they had her record a track. It was like she had to audition as herself.
Oh,
And we all kind of, I think everyone went to bat and say, look, she's up to the job. She's elderly, but she can certainly handle it, and she could, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very glad they hired her again.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, how old was she then? Wasn't she like in her 80s?
It was late 70s.
Late 70s.
Late 70s,
Wow.
maybe early 80s.
Wow.
Yeah. I'd have to do some maths, but
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, she still had it. She was great. You know, she'd get a bit tired, of course, but she didn't have to travel locations and do Rocky's voice. They got a guy who could do a little falsetto voice, and then they would put her stuff in later, you know.
Yeah.
It was just, she was far too elderly to be driving around the country to little desert towns and that doing location stuff that I did, you know.
Yeah, bless her. And finally, my guest has also done stuff like Skippy, Adventures in Bush Town. He's the computer voice in Pause. He was in Dosh in Space, Bright Sparks, and Smee in a Peter Pan cartoon as well. My guest has seen it all. He's been to tons of recording sessions, met loads of people. I've been friends with this guest for so many years. Well, okay, 3 years to be precise. But yes, he's just been very close to me, and I'm so privileged to call him a friend. My guest is none other than Keith Scott. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I love the Bullwinkle voice. It's definitely taken from Bill, definitely. And also, Keith gave me this, so I keep this in my book drawer. I occasionally read it, and
they asked me to write that little booklet when they did the big box set of all the old cartoons, and
it is so cool.
So I had to go back to my big book and just do a little cut down of certain things. So.
Man, I just love reading it. It's just so great. Oh man, well.
And I also gave him the picture in there of Bill Scott and June Foray sitting in the recording studio.
Oh, was that? I didn't know.
That's in that booklet, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
In the front section, isn't there a photo of Bill and June together in a studio when they're quite young?
There is, but I think it's just Bill. It's just cropped down to Bill, I think.
Oh, okay. Right.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. I think
the original one was both of them.
Yeah, I have it on my computer somewhere. Obviously, I'm using it.
Yeah, it looks like they're listening back to an episode that they've just done.
Yeah, you've just reminded me. I need to add some of the outtakes into my documentary. I'm so tempted now because those outtakes are so funny to listen to.
Well, yeah, I was responsible for them too because.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I gave them to somebody years ago, and they ended up on the internet. But if I'd had my way, I would have been saying, "Oh, don't do that." You know, I might get into trouble because they're copyright. You know.
Yeah.
I think people just forgive and forget a lot of that stuff these days. Ever since YouTube came along, how are you going to police all of this? You know.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Usually some people don't care about copyright, but then
there's
some websites that just don't care. They're just like, yeah, upload anything you want. You know.
Well, they do. Some people who post, newly restored Warner Brothers cartoons will get into trouble because they'll take them down and say you're breaching copyright, but then they're up again a couple of weeks later. So.
Yeah, definitely. Man, I don't know where to start. I've got so many questions for you. I will try and get through most of them as I can. First of all, I know everyone usually starts an interview with, how did you get into voice acting? But I'm going to kind of kick this off a little differently. what was it like meeting Jay Ward? Because obviously, I don't even know what I don't even know what he sounds like. I've heard everyone else's voice except Jay's. What was Jay like?
Oh, he was a really nice guy, but he was known to be a shy person. He didn't like publicity. But if he knew that you were a real fan of his stuff and you were an appreciator and that you had some knowledge, he respected you, you know. So I remember him saying, he met me and Corey when Corey was still in high school and I was only about 19, I think.
Wow.
This is like in 1973. And I remember at one point I vaguely remember saying something to him, like I was asking him a million questions, this very successful guy.
Yeah.
And then I just said something like, I appreciate you taking the time out, you know. And I said, I hope I don't look, I said, I hope I don't seem too pushy. That's right. That's what I said. And he said, no, he said, as a matter of fact, I find you pleasantly aggressive. I'll never forget that.
Oh, you've been blessed by the one and only Jay Ward. Oh man.
Yeah.
How many people? Like, I can just picture so many people. Like, I would have loved to have met Jay Ward because obviously, like, there's no interviews with him, no video interviews with him, no videos. I know there's photos, but you know, wow.
No, there really isn't. There's old newspaper interviews from way back then that I quoted at length in my book, but I can't think apparently he was once on a TV show when they were plugging the new Bullwinkle show.
Oh yes, here's Hollywood.
Yes, with Bill Scott.
Bill.
You know.
I still haven't found it to this day. I think it's lost media.
Oh, I'm sure that would have been just a local LA thing and it would have been wiped or erased or not even recorded on video.
Sadly, yeah.
But there were those still pictures taken.
Yeah, those were those ones with Helen O'Connell.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. She was a former big band singer.
Yeah.
And then later in life, she became this TV host.
Yeah, I think she unveiled the statue as well, I believe.
She was, yep.
Yeah.
That was to launch the change of network from ABC to NBC when they went to a nighttime show called The Bullwinkle Show, not Rocky and His Friends.
It was, yeah.
Mm.
Obviously, the statue's been recently unveiled again.
It has, yeah.
But obviously, the ceremony's been postponed due to COVID. When restrictions lift, will you go back to LA and see the statue?
Oh, yes, definitely. I'll be taking a photograph again. And I know it's close by the original location, but it's nowhere near where it used to be on Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah, I think it's, I can't exactly remember where it is.
Holloway, one of those streets down from Sunset. Yeah.
I remember hearing, it was something around that way. Yeah.
Yes.
So, Keith, tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, obviously you've done work, obviously the J World Productions. You've also done work for Hanna-Barbera. I mean, you've been in touch with William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, and I think
William Hanna came to Australia in 1971, and in 72 I got a job at his studio there in Sydney because I took my letter from Dawes Butler and his other voice people when I was a kid writing to these people, and he couldn't believe it, and he gave me a job working around Hanna-Barbera's studio as a office boy. I was just 18, I think. Wow. And that was great because all the animators there who were doing American series in Australia, there was one called Wait Till Your Father Gets Home and Funky Phantom. And they all knew that I was this young person who could do all these impersonations and things. So, it's so long ago. It was 1972. It was a thing for Hanna-Barbera. It was like an in-house promotional animated thing selling their wares. It was like they were going to send that to all these companies and say, we can do an animated commercial for you, you know, and I did this little character voice. But, Bill Hanna was and then when I left that, because being seasonal work every so often, there wasn't much to do, so they would let some people go. And he gave me a reference on paper about my voices. I can send you a copy of that.
Sure.
I'll scan it.
Go ahead.
It was a letter from Bill Hanna And because his name was so important in the industry, it got me an agent straight away. I just showed that letter and they said, oh yeah, we'll take you on, you know.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of luck, you know, meeting these people because they were all still around back then. That's what the difference is, you know. It would be frustrating for me now knowing about all of these people if I was your age, because they're all gone now, unfortunately, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to
Yeah,
say,
so-
what was I going to say? I was going to say something about William Hanna, but it's completely flown out of my head. I might remember in a minute. I don't know.
That's right.
See.
Yeah.
Um,
But anyway, to answer your question, that's how I started. And then
wow.
I kept in touch with all of my American idols like Bill Scott and Doris Butler and June Foray by letter, you know.
That's it.
All
That's what I
those
was going
years.
to ask. I've just remembered
Yeah.
a question. Your US agent was Don Pitts. He was also
Yeah,
June
that's
Foray's
right.
agent, Doris Butler's
That's
agent,
right.
Bill's agent. Wow, you were picked up with all the big cheeses. Like, how did that happen?
He heard that demo that I put on Facebook, well, probably a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought, well, I think I told you, June Foray phoned him after I gave her a copy of it and played it to him over the telephone at around midnight. And then I didn't realize that he was in an office that was right opposite the hotel I was staying at in Hollywood.
Wow.
And I knew who the name Don Pitts was. You know, for years I'd known that. But he had this funny, squeaky little voice like this. And he rings me up and says, hey, Keith, it's Don Pitts here. June Foray played me this tape of you. I'd really like to represent you in this country. You know, so because that knocked my socks off because I was visiting and researching the book that I was writing, but I had no idea, you know. The only reason I did that demo is that I had heard a rumor that Jay Ward's daughter Tiffany was going to revive the characters. And I thought, well, I'm going to be an idiot if I don't do a demo and at least fly the flag. I might not ever get it, you know, but I did the demo and of course it worked, you know, but I had no idea it was going to work, you know. So that was that year, 1991, in the middle of 1991,
Wow.
when Don Pitts contacted me out of the blue on the telephone. I was still having breakfast in my hotel room and he called me, you know. He said, I said, where are you? And he said, right across the road from you in the Taft building. So I went up there and there he was, and very nice guy with really white hair and big tanned face, and just one of the nicest people I'd ever met, Don Pitts. And from that point on, he was quite happy that I was still living in Australia, and any work he could get me doing commercials, and he pushed for me with the Jay Ward people. He having an American agent doing that pushing made my job a lot easier.
Wow.
I think if I didn't have Don Pitts behind me and June, I might not have been able from Australia to do those voices that I was finally blessed to do, you know.
Well, good for you, Keith. I'm so happy.
But it's, you know, it's the old cliche.
Yeah.
Thank you. But it's that old cliche of being in the right place at the right time, and the other one that says it's not what you know, it's who you know, so.
Yeah, 30
that's
years
all very
ago.
True. Yeah, all those years ago. Seems like yesterday.
Yeah, definitely does. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
I have a sister born in 1991, and she's just turned
Right.
30, so it's just
right.
crazy, honestly.
Wow.
Another question is, you have 3 children, right?
I do, yeah.
You do. Were they born in like the 80s, 90s?
78, and the younger ones were twins, so they were born in 82.
I was going to say, did they
Yeah.
ever grow up watching you do cartoon voices on
Oh, yeah,
stuff?
they came to, when they were young, they came to a few recording sessions
Oh, wow.
with me and saw me doing, I think they were at one where I did all of the Warner Brothers characters, because that was another thing I was allowed to do in Australia, all of Mel Blanc's voices, because when he died, they were looking for replacements, you know.
Yeah, like Dreamworld Australia, I think.
Yeah, except it was called Warner Brothers Movie
Warner
World.
Brothers, yeah,
Yep.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes, that's right. And there was that. In fact, when we did George of the Jungle 2, it was right opposite that Movie World theme park. There was a studio up there in Queensland.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was the sequel, the bad one. Yeah.
Wow. Well, not to make you feel old, but you have grandchildren as well. How many grandchildren do you have?
Yeah. I am old. What the heck?
Oh, don't listen. I always say blank years young. I always call
Well,
everyone
that's true. Yeah. It's having a maybe old in years but young in mind. So there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I've got we've got boy, I think we've got 11 grandkids between us because
Oh my gosh.
we're both second time around us. So this is my second marriage and my wife's second marriage too.
Wow.
So yeah, all the kids we had ended up being breeders. What can I say? You know?
Have your grandkids ever grown up watching you do voices or watching any of the cartoons?
Not the grandkids so much. They're aware of it as they got older. But the trouble with very young kids is the same as when my kids were very young. If you've got an ability to do all of these characters and things, it doesn't work. You know, people think, oh, you'll be able to do all the funny voices when they're having bedtime stories, but young kids don't take to it really well. If you start doing all these voices, they look confused and it's like they're coming out of the face they know. So their attitude until they get a lot older is stop doing that, you know, just talk in your normal voice.
Yeah.
Whereas once they're in their teenage years, then it's a whole different ballpark, you know, then they enjoy it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I have a nephew who's nearly 3 years old, and I always do funny voices when I'm reading stories to him, or I'm playing with like his cars or his dinosaurs or anything like that. So yeah, it is kind of a good practice for me, but not.
It is, yeah. No, they're definitely good to practice on because if you can get a reaction or you can get a smile, you know you're on the right path.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it's because they're the most unforgiving audience of all. They just tell you the truth straight away. Yeah, they'll get up and walk away if they get bored.
Yeah. Oh, that's so sweet. Another question I've got to ask you is about Bill Scott and like passing the role down to you. I know obviously you may have told this story many times, but could you tell it again, if you don't mind?
You just how it happened? Well,
how it happened, and then the whole.
I met him in that trip in 1973 when I met Jay Ward, but that was more. I was just starting in the business myself, so I was writing to him in those days as a super fan of Jay Ward. But I did send him some lists and things that I'd done, all the cartoons, and he actually said just before I got to America, he sent me a letter saying, you know, actually, some of this stuff that you're compiling is better than the stuff we've got in the studio. So when I met him for lunch when I got to America, he said, one of these days you're going to write a book about us. You know, I think I told you this before. And that was in 73. It was scary because, you know, when you're 19 and you're with your idol, you think they're just being nice by saying that, and you can never see, you know, that would ever come true. But sure enough, 20 years later, it came true. I was the person who wrote the book about, you know. But you have to do a lot of living first and gain a lot more knowledge before you can do that book. So I just wish, my most fervent wish was that book came out 15 years after he died. And I would like him to have been alive to read it, because some of the other people who stayed living, like Skip Craig and the editor at the studio and all of those people. Yeah, he is. They really liked the book that I wrote. So they said that those guys would have appreciated it. Yeah. I do remember talking to John Scott, his son, you know, to get some background. Yeah. And I was pleased to see that you were able to make contact with Bill's family.
Yeah, it was, I got in touch with Barbara at first, and then I kind of struggled to get
I've never spoken to Barbara, yeah.
I think Barbara was most easiest because she was on Facebook, so I spoke to her, and then and like a year later, she gave me like John's email, so I shot him an email. Mm-hmm. And, we've just been in touch ever since. Just conversing about Bill. And
I would like to have met Barbara, but it just never happened.
Actually, I've just remembered something. John told me that Bill's first ever acting role was for World War II. In the motion picture unit.
Right. Yeah.
It was he did like a Japanese pilot voice. It was 1943. It was a short made by Frank Thomas, you know, one of Disney's.
Yes, it would have been one of their training films or
Yeah, so he did it. Frank convinced him to audition, and that was the first time he did a voice for something.
Well, I didn't know that. You've educated me tonight. That's great.
I was educated by John, actually. John was the person who told me.
the trouble is a lot of those training films disappeared. They weren't kept, so they've either just been destroyed or just are just missing, lost.
It's on YouTube.
It is the one he did.
Yeah.
The one he did the voice for. Oh,
Yeah.
You'll have to send me the link to that.
I'll show you after this interview.
Yeah.
And I'll stick the link in the description if you're interested, people at home.
Wow. Yeah. I do know that he did a few early voices at UPA in 51, 52.
Yeah.
Yeah. Georgie and the Dragon.
And he did work for John Sutherland as well.
John Sutherland?
Yeah, John Sutherland Productions. He did after he left UPA.
Yeah, a lot of writing and a few voices. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Oh man. Would you mind telling me the story about, how Bill passed you down the role and then he said it also to like Frank Welker and
Sure. He first of all, as I said, at that first meeting, I would have been too scared to have done the Bullwinkle voice for him, but he knew I could do voices. Peter Lorre and some of those old movie actors, but it was a few years later when I met him over there. I think it was like 1980, 81, and by then he knew that I could do all of these other voices, and other people had told him. And that was when he used the expression "smart goof." He said, "Look, his voice, the way he said it was a lot of people do Bullwinkle like this. They make him too dumb." But he said, "But you've got the voice proper," because he said he sounds smart but still dumb. So he said he's kind of a smart goof. So he said, "You really got it." And he said, "Boy," he said, "that's close." He said, when I go, he said, "Boy, you've inherited that voice and Dudley Do Right." And then I found out, just again from meeting people and hearing things through the grapevine, that he had also said the same thing to Frank Welker and to Joe Alaskey. So it's just the way showbiz is,
But you've done you've done Bullwinkle the longest time.
I did. I did him for about 22 years. Yeah.
Wow.
They've got some new person doing it now.
Brad Norman.
Yeah, that's right. I met him on Facebook very briefly, and he seemed pretty nice. It's just that's what happens in the business.
Yeah.
The whole property of Bullwinkle was taken over by a brand new company, and it's quite common when that happens for people to say, right, we're going to have a brand new sweep of this. We're going to get new voices and new writers. So I kind of could see the writing on the wall, that.
I think it was.
Although
DreamWorks.
Yep, at DreamWorks. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they did audition me. They did a token audition. It was sort of like when they auditioned June Foray to play Rocky. In 2012, from Sydney in 2012, they had me do a session for that CGI cartoon that accompanied the Peabody movie, I think. Yeah. I think that was when Tom Kenny got the voice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did a token audition. I don't think the director liked it because I knew so much. I was throwing in knowledge here and there, and it was like a bit confronting to him, I think. So I should have shut my mouth and just.
He should have been honest that he was directing you.
Yeah. But these things are happening. I could see as I felt my time I'd had the great 22 years. All right, I'm happy to pass the torch now, Yeah, and I haven't, to be honest, just my own personal opinion, I don't care for the design of the new Rocky and Bullwinkle. Yeah. I'm sure it's valid and it's more modern, but that's just me. I'm an old traditionalist. So.
Yeah, just like me though, because I prefer the old
stuff to the
new stuff. Yeah. Did you ever audition for the new cartoon, the new 2D one?
No. By then, I think they'd signed contracts with people like Brad Norman and the new Rocky voice and all that.
Oh yeah, Tara Strong. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I met her very briefly when June Foray passed. The people who put the big tribute together. I think
Martin Evanier was the guy who put it together.
He was. That's right. He contacted me and said, "Is there any chance you could come over for this unit?" But because June Foray had kind of, introduced me to Don Pitts and all of those things over many, many years, I had a relationship with her that was pretty unusual, pretty close.
Yeah.
Probably for, I'd say 30 years.
Wow.
And I just thought, we got a cheap airfare, and I flew over, and they had me get up and speak to an audience of about 1,000, 1,200 people that were in the animation industry. And I was a stranger to 99.9% of them, but I got up and did this whole story about, I mentioned recording the Fractured Fairy Tale Foxbox thing. I mentioned a few stories about June Foray that were funny. Tiffany Ward introduced me. She was on stage with me, and there was no hard feelings. She already had, she now had Brad Norman, but I just felt I had to be there because I was part of that era,
Yeah, I'm so proud
So
of
that was,
you.
that was, I know Mark Evanier has the footage, but so far it hasn't been released, which I'm looking forward to that though.
Yeah,
I've got a million-
I'd love to see it as well.
Yeah, I've got a million photos from that night, but not the video footage. They had to be very careful with it because because she was so beloved in the industry, they were allowed to use little clips of her career from a million different producers. Anyone else that would have had that would have had to pay big licensing fees, but all of these companies threw it in for zero as long as it wasn't on the final tape. So when he does release the video footage, it'll just be the speakers. It won't be the cartoons themselves.
Yeah.
For copyright reasons,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've heard a story that they auditioned June for the new 2D cartoon because it was actually being made before she died. 2016 they started production.
I think they did. By then, I do think she was past it, to be brutally honest. I think I did an interview with her on Stu's show in 2011.
Yeah.
Yes. And she was by then so elderly that she fell asleep on his couch and couldn't do the interview. So I could see even then, like what was she, 99 when she passed away?
99, well, yes.
Yeah, so she would have been in her early 90s when she had this day where she fell asleep. And I could tell by then it was over, like you being polite.
So you never did the interview then with Stu?
Oh, no, she spoke for a little while, but it was all, on his show, it's one of those podcast things. So it went for 3-4 hours. It was too much for her. She just got really tired.
I thought you meant you didn't end up doing the interview altogether.
I did 2 Stu's shows with her a few years before in 2009. Mm-hmm. And she was bright as a button then. So just in that 2 years, you could just tell that the age thing had finally caught up with her. Yeah.
It's really sad though, isn't it?
It is sad, but boy, I don't think anyone had the longevity of her career. So she sure had a great run.
Yeah, definitely. I agree as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, bless her. Well, I really do wish I had the chance to speak with her when she was still alive, but alas.
Yeah. In her heyday, yes. Yeah, she was very gracious to everyone. Yeah.
Oh, bless her.
Yeah.
I think, she auditioned for the new Rocky show, and I think she died before I'm unsure if they were going to hire her or not, or they just, I think she died during pre-production, so
it could be, yeah.
Tara was brought in to do it, and the first 2 episodes, she did a June Foray impression, but then it sort of started to grow out into her own, similar sounding to Timmy Turner from Fairly Odd Parents.
Right, yeah.
So she opted to re-record the first 4 episodes she did, but with her own take on Rocky.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hear much about that, but that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. The next thing I'd like to ask you about, moving away from the J-Word stuff, is Thomas and the Magic Railroad. I mean, obviously, I'm presuming a lot of people already asked you about this. You were the original voice of Diesel 10.
I was, that happened because I was in Hollywood for those 6 months doing the Rocky and Bullwinkle movie, doing the narrator voice, William Conrad, and doing Bullwinkle and Boris. And the girls who were on the casting of that movie recommended me to Britt Allcroft because she was in Hollywood at the time looking for a voice for Diesel and a couple of other things. So I went and auditioned, and she was mentioning like she wanted a voice like Orson Welles or some distinctive villain voice. And I just tried a couple of things, and then I thought, well, either I'll hear from them or I won't. And I got back to Sydney, and within a week, they'd arranged a flight for me to go to Toronto in Canada and be the voice of Diesel. And I did it, and I recorded the thing. We were there for about 4 or 5 days.
And you met Michael Angelis?
Yeah, I did. He was very nice. And also to young guy who did, can't think of his name, blonde guy. He was, he did the voice.
Was it the original voice of Thomas?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, what's his name?
Yeah, you'd know it. You'd know it for sure. But I had lunch with those guys. And then we went to the studio and saw some of the modeling.
John Bellis.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, very nice guy, John Bellis. Yeah. And then I flew to LA for a couple of days. And by the time I got home, it was only another week. And Don Pitts rang me up from LA and said, they want to change the voice of Diesel. They've done a little preview, and the character, you did him as a villain, but he was so villainous they're scared that it might upset little kids. Well, you know, I to this day I still think kids would understand it, because I did exactly the same voice as the old big bad wolf on the Walt Disney Three Little Pigs. And I'm sure a lot of little kids saw that back in the 1930s and they weren't scared, you know.
Yeah, wow.
But anyway, that was at least I had a 5-minute career in the Thomas property.
You were too good for them. You were too good.
Oh,
for them.
well, that was, yeah, that's a nice way of putting it.
I have the photo somewhere of you with Michael, with
Yes,
Britt.
it was a group shot. Yeah,
It was. I'll just.
that was the day we went back to the studio after lunch, and it was just before they said goodbye to us, because all the recording was finished.
And I'm still jealous that you got to meet Michael Angelis. Yeah, there's
That's the
John
one,
Bellis
yeah.
on the left, and
Yeah,
then
and there's
Patrick Breed,
Britt Allcroft in the middle. Yeah.
Allcroft, Michael, and you.
Yeah.
Oh.
I remember that day very well.
What was it like meeting Michael?
I mean, in one sense, I was so used to, my 30 years of voiceover work. It was just like doing another job with an actor that you meet that day. I knew of him. I'd known him from British dramas, and he was very professional. I'm sure he thought I was. And it was just very pleasant. But it was just like, again, like so many of these jobs you do, it's like ships in the night. You might not ever see them again, or you might work with them a lot,
Yeah.
But that's just the philosophy you take in for this business once you're kind of used to it.
about A Touch of Frost, right?
I did. I mentioned that I had just seen him about 2 weeks before in Sydney on a repeat of A Touch of Frost, and he was amazed. I suppose he would think, but then he said that he'd been in Sydney quite a few times. I guess he'd done a few productions that were done in Australia. I can't think of what they would have been.
I'm having a look. I believe he only starred in one episode of A Touch of Frost. It was the episode Penny for a Guy.
Penny for a Guy, that's right.
I can't find anything else about him. It probably is. I'll just search his Wikipedia page real quick. No, it was just the one episode. He was Reggie Stansfield in the episode Penny for the Guy.
Okay, right.
Yeah, that was 1997.
I do remember him. I remember him saying that he'd been to Sydney a couple of times, and I'm sure that would have been on a professional basis, either a stage play or a film or something, and that he wanted to get back to Sydney. But he still seemed amazed that somebody from Australia knew that he was in this Frost thing. Couldn't believe it. But he was very pleasant. He was very pleasant and very professional,
Yeah, and man, I can't believe for some reason, when he died, the first person I thought of was you, because obviously you met him behind the scenes of Magic Railroad. Man, what a guy. I've seen him in a lot of stuff now. I've been rewatching most of his stuff, and oh my gosh.
I do remember sitting around the table with him when we were doing the read-through the night before we recorded all the soundtrack for Thomas.
Yeah.
And, kind of getting to know him, and that was very pleasant.
Yeah, definitely.
It was about a 6-hour recording, and it was all finished.
Uh-huh.
And they had to do some more work on the Rocky and Bullwinkle movie, which wasn't released till the following year.
Yeah.
So they found out I was in Canada, and then I went from the Thomas session, stayed in the same studio, and they hooked me up to New York, and I did some work on the Bullwinkle movie.
Oh, wow. Did you ever tell anyone else on the Thomas set about your work on Rocky and Bullwinkle? Did you tell Mike?
I think it just came up in conversation that everyone was talking about current projects that they were involved in.
Uh-huh. Wow.
And the main stuff for Bullwinkle had been shot, but it wasn't until around about early 2000 that they started getting the voice people back into the studio, back and forth. They flew me back 10 times in the year 2000 back and forth from Sydney to LA,
Wow.
just to do little pickup lines and things. And
That's so
it was,
crazy.
yeah, it was.
Wow. Someone has made like an well, my friend actually made like an automated Michelangelo's voice on this website where you put in anything and it will say something in his voice.
Ah, right.
So
right.
it's like an AI. It's really creepy, but it's actually surprisingly accurate.
Yeah.
I have to send you a clip of it at some point. We might have to put this into a part 2, everybody, because there's so much to talk about. Keith's like the guest I've been so excited to have on. I need to ask him everything, but I can't do it all in one video. Yes, I did it with Wally Wingert, but that kind of just because we had all the time in the world. Unfortunately, I don't have all the time.
I've never met Wally. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he did work for the Garfield show with Mark Evanier and Frank Welker.
I know. I've heard some of his work. I think he's very good. Yeah.
And welcome back to the most annoying question I ever ask everyone. It is, Keith, did you ever meet Frank Welker?
Yes, I met him. 3 or 4 times.
Wow.
Once in person, I did a lot of voiceovers with him. I was based in Sydney, and they had a technology back in the 90s called ISDN where they could hook up to another country. So this was hooked up to Hollywood to do Taco Bell commercials. I was Boris Badenov. Corey was the old Rocky and Bullwinkle narrator. June Foray was Rocky. And Frank was then Bullwinkle just for a couple of commercials. And then luckily for me, I ended up doing all of the Bill Scott voices for the next 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet, well, because obviously everyone always pairs Frank up with Peter Cullen. In fact, I'm meeting them both when they come to Scotland this October, if protocols allow, and this whole Freedom Day doesn't go off the rails. Did you ever meet Peter Cullen? Just out of any, just random?
I spoke to him, I think, on the phone once from Corey's house. It's a vague memory, but it's a long time ago.
Wow.
Was he on Transformers?
He was on Transformers. He was Optimus Prime himself.
I met him at the session. I went to a Transformers session.
When Keith told me this, I went crazy. Keith?
Casey Kasem, Scatman Crothers, the whole schmear. It was great, you know. And then the next day we were back to do, what was the other series?
G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe, yep.
For those of you at home, basically, me and Keith were talking, and I brought up Frank Welker, and then I went on to Peter Cullen, and then I found out when Keith visited Corey often, he actually went to some of his recording sessions, not just the Jay Ward ones, but he went to the Wally Burr ones,
a lot of other things. In those days when I used to go to Hollywood once a year, and I wasn't involved with Jay Wood stuff, but I would go there as an educational thing for myself in being in the voiceover field, and because I'd known Corey for years.
You have such a
I
strong
took it upon
friendship
myself to go to different recording sessions, and at least then I'd have the knowledge of what big time Hollywood was like when I went back to Sydney, you know. And it was useful because you do learn by broadening your horizons like that. And Corey actually took me to a few sessions, and then the directors there got me to do little voices while I was there, you know, because they said, we won't tell the union, you know, we'll just have you do this little line. And I did a Paul Frees voice. He took me to one session where they were redoing a little bit of the Pirates of the Caribbean, Disneyland stuff.
Yeah.
And when the director found out I could do a Paul Frees type of character, he had me doing one of the pirates. And
wow.
I wasn't, you know, it was only a couple of lines, but it was just, if I had been honest and told the truth, and I would have had to pay a union fee and all of this, but we just shut up and
yeah.
Nobody knew any different, you know.
Yeah. Wow.
But I just educated myself over 20 years going to a lot of Hollywood recording sessions, and that's how I met Frank Welker. Anyway, we did this thing on the Taco Bell commercial. He was Bullwinkle. Then 4 years later, when I was over there to do the George of the Jungle narration, that's where I met him in person again. He was coming out from doing his stuff, and I was just about to go in. So,
wow. Well, I will
definitely. And he was a legend. He was a legend. He was a few years older than me, and I'd known of his work when I was still in high school. He was already doing a few cartoons then. When he was very young, Scooby-Doo, you know. So.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And if If he does another GalaxyCon thing that I've done with him before I go to Edinburgh, I'll mention you. But if he doesn't, I will mention you when I go to Edinburgh. Yes. I promise you. If he remembers you, I will tell you all about it.
He might go, oh yeah, but he'll remember.
The one
me,
from
I'm
Australia.
Sure. Yes, yeah, he'll remember.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he was great. I can remember him doing the hookup to Sydney with some of the commercials that we did.
Oh, wow.
And we were swapping other voices just between. He started doing Dan Rather, This American Newsreader, and I did some other voice for him, Billy Connolly or something.
Oh,
and I did a Billy Connolly for him, and he was laughing his head off, and the engineer in Sydney was laughing at his newsreader voice.
Wow.
It's like you get together with these people and you're in the same field. You just kind of just bounce off each other, you don't have to get to know them that well. They can tell that you're a pro and I can tell that they're professional,
Yeah, so. Definitely. Yeah, you need to meet Frank next time you go to LA.
Oh yeah. Well, I'd love to have had longer time with him, put it that way.
Yeah.
But as Dawes Butler, the late Dawes Butler used to say, there's never really any hang-ups once you're amongst pros, because he said they're the friendliest of people,
Yeah.
So.
Anyways, guys, that's not the end of it, because there will be a part 2 sometime in the future. Keith, where can we find you? Where can we find you on social media?
I'm mainly Facebook, but I haven't got into TikTok and all of the new age things.
I don't really like TikTok, to be fair.
Right, yeah. And I'm not a Twitter. I don't like Twitter because it's sort of like suddenly the whole world is a smart ass, So I just Facebook's fairly easygoing. Okay. You'll get an occasional person who's a hater or whatever, but 99% is fine.
Yeah. I had a weird dream about TikTok the other night. I dreamt that we all had it on our phones and we were like struggling to. We were trying to delete them because they were. It said apparently it would make our phones go up in flames. So we were just trying to delete them all, and then they're like, "No, throw the phones out of the room," and they all exploded outside. I'm like, wow. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. We will be back with part 2 sometime later in the year. Keith, thank you so much for letting me interview you.
That's my pleasure, Amber. My pleasure. And let's see, who will I say goodbye? I'll do Porky Pig.
Good idea.
Oh, it's great talking to you, Amber. Yeah, that's all, folks.
Woo! Anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day wherever you are in the world, and I will see you around. So it's goodbye from me, goodbye from Keith and Porky and Bullwinkle and everybody else. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
And good.